Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Leviathan and looked out at the endless black of space. The ship was huge, over a kilometer long, and it carried enough weapons to destroy entire fleets. But nobody in the galaxy knew it existed. That was exactly how humanity wanted it. For 200 years, humans had been moving slowly through space, building colonies and mining asteroids. They looked peaceful to anyone watching. They traded with nearby systems and kept to themselves. But the truth was different. Humans had been preparing for war since the day they left Earth. Jake had been captain of the Leviathan for 15 years. The ship was his life, his home, and his weapon. It floated in the dark between stars, hidden from all sensors. The crew of 8,000 people lived and worked in complete silence. They were soldiers, engineers, and scientists who had given up normal lives to serve on a ship that did not officially exist. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Rodriguez walked over to Jake with a data pad in her hands. She was the tactical officer and one of the smartest people on the ship. Her job was to study alien movements and predict where threats might come from. She had been doing this job for 10 years and she was very good at it. "Captain, we have a problem," Lisa said quietly. "The monitoring stations on the edge of human space have been going dark. One by one, they just stopped sending signals." Jake took the data pad and studied the information. For 6 months, automated stations had been failing in a pattern. It was not random equipment failure. Someone or something was moving through human space and destroying the stations as they went. "How many stations have we lost?" Jake asked. 47 in the last 6 months, Lisa replied. "The pattern suggests they are being destroyed by ships moving in formation, big ships." Jake nodded slowly. This was what humanity had been waiting for. First contact with alien life. But it would not be the peaceful meeting that most humans imagined. The aliens were clearly hostile, and they were scouting human territory. Down in the engine room, Chief Engineer Danny Walsh was running final tests on the ship's weapon systems. Danny was a quiet man who understood machines better than people. He had spent 20 years working on the Leviathan's most secret weapons. Some of them were so powerful that even thinking about using them made him nervous. The plasma cannons could crack moons in half. The quantum torpedoes could pass through any shield and explode inside enemy ships. But the most frightening weapon was something called the Star Killer. Only 5 people on the ship knew what it really did, and Danny hoped they would never have to use it. "All weapon systems are green," Danny reported over the comm system. "The Star Killer is charged and ready, but I really hope we don't need it." Jake smiled grimly. Danny said the same thing every time they ran weapons tests. The engineer was a good man who did not like violence, but he understood that sometimes violence was the only option. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. They monitored space traffic, tracked ship movements, and listened to communications from across human space. Most humans lived peaceful lives on colonies and space stations. They had no idea that ships like the Leviathan existed to protect them. Jake walked to the main view screen and activated the long-range sensors. The display showed a map of local space with human colonies marked in blue. The edge of human territory was marked with a red line. Beyond that line was unknown space where aliens might be hiding. "Lisa, show me the pattern again," Jake said. Lisa touched her controls, and the display changed. Red dots appeared where monitoring stations had been destroyed. The pattern was clear. The aliens were moving in a straight line toward the inner human colonies. They were taking their time and being careful, but they were definitely coming. "How long before they reach our main colonies?" Jake asked. "At their current speed, maybe 3 weeks. Lisa answered. "But they might speed up once they finish their scouting." Jake made his decision. "Send a coded message to Earth Command. Tell them we have detected hostile alien movement toward human space. Request permission to intercept." The message would take several hours to reach Earth, and several more hours for a reply to come back. But Jake knew what the answer would be. Humanity had built ships like the Leviathan for exactly this situation. The crew continued their work, but everyone could feel the tension building. After 200 years of preparation, humanity was about to meet its first alien neighbors, and those neighbors were clearly not coming in peace. Jake stood at his command post and watched the tactical display. Somewhere out there in the dark, alien ships were moving toward human space. They probably thought humans were weak and easy to conquer. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Leviathan and her sister ships had been built by a species that had fought wars for thousands of years. Humans understood violence in ways that peaceful aliens could not imagine. The coming battle would teach the galaxy an important lesson about humanity. Jake smiled coldly as he watched the alien ships move closer to human space. Let them come, he thought. Humanity was ready. Commander Zerath stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the data about the human species. The ship was massive, 5 kilometers long and armed with weapons that had conquered 47 worlds. Behind him, a fleet of 200 warships moved through space toward human territory. Zerath belonged to a species called the Korath, and they had been the military leaders of the hegemony for 3 centuries. The hegemony was a group of alien species that controlled this part of the galaxy. They had a simple rule for dealing with new species: join us or die. The humans looked weak from the intelligence reports. They had small colonies scattered across only 30 star systems. Their ships were tiny compared to hegemony vessels. Their weapons technology seemed primitive. Zerath expected this to be another easy conquest. "Admiral, we are approaching the first human system," reported his tactical officer. "Our scouts have identified it as Proxima Centauri. Intelligence says it has about 50,000 human colonists." Zerath nodded. The plan was simple. Arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and destroy anyone who resisted. It had worked on every other species they had encountered. The humans would see the massive fleet and give up immediately. "Prepare the standard conquest broadcast," Zerath ordered. "Tell the humans they have 1 hour to surrender their system or we will destroy their colony." But when the hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Proxima Centauri, they found something unexpected. The system was empty. All the human ships were gone. The space stations were abandoned. Even the orbital factories had been shut down and evacuated. "Where are they?" Zerath demanded. "Our intelligence said this system had a large population." His sensor officer worked frantically at his controls. "Sir, I'm detecting no life signs on any of the planets or stations, but the evacuation must have been recent. Some of the stations still have power." Zerath felt uneasy. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen an entire system evacuate so quickly. How had the humans known they were coming? The hegemony scouts had been careful to avoid detection. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, "I'm detecting a massive energy signature dropping out of hyperspace behind us." Zerath turned to look at the main display. What he saw made his blood turn cold. A ship was appearing behind his fleet, but it was like no ship he had ever seen. It was dark gray, almost black, and it was huge. Not as long as his flagship, but much more massive. It looked like it had been built for one purpose: war. "What is that thing?" Zerath whispered. On the bridge of the Leviathan, Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet through his tactical display. 200 ships all lined up in a perfect formation. They had made themselves easy targets. "All weapons are charged and ready," reported Lisa Rodriguez from her tactical station. "We have clear firing solutions on their entire fleet." Jake had received permission from Earth Command to engage the aliens with extreme force. The message had been simple: show them that humanity is not to be messed with. Make sure they never want to come back. "Danny, are all systems ready?" Jake asked over the comm. "All weapons are green," came the reply from engineering. "The quantum torpedoes are loaded and the plasma cannons are at full charge. But Jake, there are 200 ships out there. Are you sure about this?" Jake was sure. The Leviathan had been built to fight entire fleets by itself. Every system on the ship was designed to maximize damage while keeping the ship alive. The aliens were about to learn why humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment. "Open fire," Jake ordered calmly. The Leviathan's main plasma cannons fired first. Beams of superheated energy crossed space at the speed of light and struck 3 alien cruisers before they could even detect the attack. The ships simply vanished in balls of white fire. Before the aliens could react, the quantum torpedoes launched. These weapons used technology that the aliens had never seen. They passed through space-time itself, ignoring shields and armor. They materialized inside enemy ships and exploded. 12 more alien ships died in the first 30 seconds. Commander Zerath watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart by a single enemy ship. His vessels tried to return fire, but their energy weapons just splashed harmlessly against the human ship's shields. Nothing they had could penetrate that strange defensive barrier. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel." Zerath screamed into his comm system. "Use everything we have." The alien fleet turned all their weapons on the Leviathan. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles struck the human ship. For a moment, the Leviathan disappeared in a cloud of explosions and fire. Zerath felt a moment of hope. Then the human ship emerged from the fire completely undamaged. Jake watched as the alien weapons failed to even scratch his ship's shields. "Lisa, show them what real firepower looks like." The Leviathan unleashed its full arsenal. Plasma cannons fired continuously, while quantum torpedoes materialized inside enemy ships. Point defense lasers shot down incoming missiles before they could get close. The human ship moved through space with impossible grace, avoiding the clumsy alien formations while dealing death with every shot. In 20 minutes, the alien fleet was reduced to burning wreckage. Only a few ships managed to escape into hyperspace, including Commander Zerath's flagship. Jake stood on his bridge and watched the debris field that had once been an alien fleet. 200 ships destroyed by one human vessel. The message was clear. Humanity was not a weak species to be conquered. "Send a message to Earth Command," Jake ordered. "First contact established. Hostile aliens engaged and defeated. We are ready for whatever comes next." The Leviathan turned and disappeared back into the darkness between stars, leaving behind only wreckage and the beginning of a legend that would spread throughout the galaxy. The news of the fleet's destruction spread through hegemony space like wildfire. Commander Zerath stood before the Hegemony Council, his uniform still damaged from the battle. Around him sat representatives from 12 different alien species, all of them leaders of the Confederation that had ruled this part of the galaxy for 1,000 years. "You lost 200 ships to a single enemy vessel?" asked Counselor Thane, a tall being with gray skin and 4 arms. "How is this possible?" Zerath tried to explain what he had witnessed, but it sounded impossible even to him. The human ship was unlike anything we have ever encountered. Their weapons passed through our shields like they did not exist. Our most powerful cannons could not damage their hull. It was as if they had been preparing for this battle for centuries. The Council members looked at each other with growing concern. The hegemony had conquered hundreds of worlds and absorbed dozens of species. No one had ever destroyed a hegemony fleet so completely. Admiral Krex the Destroyer leaned forward in his chair. He was a massive being from a warrior species that had joined the hegemony 50 years ago. "One ship cannot defeat an empire. I will take a war fleet of 2,000 vessels and destroy these humans completely." The Council voted to give Krex command of the largest fleet in hegemony history. They would bring battleships designed to crack planets, temporal weapons that could age enemy hulls to dust, and gravity bombs that could collapse stars. The humans would learn what happened to species that defied the hegemony. But hundreds of light years away, humanity was already preparing for the next attack. In a secret facility buried deep inside an asteroid, Amy Carter worked with a team of linguists and code breakers to translate captured hegemony communications. Amy was young but brilliant. She had learned 12 human languages by the age of 20 and had a gift for understanding how different minds worked. When pieces of alien technology were recovered from the battle wreckage, she was the first person to figure out how their communication systems worked. "They're planning something big," Amy reported to her supervisor. "The communications traffic has increased by 300%. They're moving ships from all over their territory toward human space." The intelligence that Amy's team gathered was sent immediately to Captain Jake Morrison aboard the Leviathan. The ship was hiding in the shadow of a gas giant, using the planet's magnetic field to mask its energy signature. Jake studied the reports while Chief Engineer Danny Walsh worked on modifications to the ship's weapons systems. They knew the aliens would come back with more ships and better weapons. Humanity needed to be ready. "Danny, how is the Starkiller project coming along?" Jake asked over the internal comm. "The modifications are complete," Danny replied from engineering. "But Jake, you know what this weapon does? Are we really ready to use something like this?" Jake understood Danny's concerns. The Starkiller was not actually designed to destroy stars. It was much worse than that. The weapon could cause a controlled solar flare, turning an entire star into a massive directed energy weapon. Any ships caught in the stellar eruption would be instantly vaporized. "May not have a choice," Jake said quietly. "If they come with the kind of fleet our intelligence suggests, conventional weapons might not be enough." 2 weeks later, the Hegemony war fleet arrived at the edge of human space. Admiral Krex commanded 2,000 ships, including massive dreadnoughts that were 10 kilometers long. The fleet was so large that it took 3 hours for all the ships to drop out of hyperspace. Krex had chosen his target carefully. The system of Ross 128 was uninhabited, but had a convenient red giant star. The system's position made it a natural stopping point for any attack on the inner human colonies. If the humans tried to defend it, he would destroy them. If they did not, he would use it as a base for attacking their core worlds. When the Hegemony fleet arrived, they found the Leviathan waiting for them. The human ship appeared to be alone and damaged, venting atmosphere and drifting slowly through space. "It looks like their monster ship is already defeated," Krex said with satisfaction. "All ships, move in and finish it off." But Captain Jake Morrison was not defeated. He was hunting. The apparent damage to the Leviathan was carefully staged. The venting atmosphere was just water vapor from the ship's recycling systems. The ship's weapons were fully charged and ready. Jake had positioned his ship exactly where he wanted it, close enough to the red giant star for his plan to work. "Admiral, we're detecting multiple energy spikes from the human ship," reported Krex's sensor officer. "It's powering up weapon systems." Before Krex could react, the Leviathan revealed its true nature. The ship's stealth systems disengaged and its weapons came online. But instead of firing at the alien fleet, the ship turned toward the red giant star. "Danny, initiate Starkiller sequence," Jake ordered. In the Leviathan's engineering section, Danny Walsh activated humanity's most terrible weapon. Deep space probes that had been secretly placed around the star weeks earlier began firing specialized particles into the stellar core. The particles were designed to destabilize the star's magnetic field and cause a massive eruption. The red giant began to pulse with increasing energy. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Krex watched in growing horror as the star started to brighten. "What are they doing?" he demanded. His science officer worked frantically at his controls. "Sir, the star is becoming unstable. It's going to erupt. A solar flare is building that will engulf this entire system." Krex realized too late what the humans had done. They had turned the star itself into a weapon. "All ships, retreat immediately! Get us out of this system!" But it was too late. The red giant erupted in a directed burst of plasma and radiation that swept across the system like the breath of an angry god. The stellar fire moved at nearly the speed of light, giving the alien ships no time to escape. 2,000 hegemony vessels were caught in the eruption. Their shields, designed to protect against enemy weapons, were useless against the raw power of a star. The ships burned like candles in a furnace, their hulls melting and their crews dying instantly. The Leviathan, protected by specialized shielding, that had been designed specifically for this weapon, rode the edge of the stellar storm like a surfer riding a wave. The ship emerged from the fire completely unharmed, while the space around it was filled with the ashes of an entire fleet. Admiral Krex's flagship was one of the few ships that managed to escape, but barely. Half of his hull was melted, and most of his crew was dead. As he fled into hyperspace, he sent a desperate message to the Hegemony Council. "The humans are not a normal species," he transmitted. "They command the very stars as weapons. We cannot fight beings who can turn suns into guns." Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the debris field that had once been the largest fleet in hegemony history. The message was clear. Humanity would use any weapon necessary to defend itself. "Send word to Earth Command," Jake ordered. "The second wave has been defeated, but I think we've gotten their attention now." Fear spread through hegemony space like a plague. The destruction of Admiral Krex's fleet had shattered the Confederation's belief in their own power. For the first time in 1,000 years, hegemony member species were questioning whether their empire could protect them. On the hegemony capital world, emergency sessions of the Council ran day and night. Species that had been subjects for centuries were now demanding answers. How had two of their largest fleets been destroyed by a single enemy ship? What kind of beings could weaponize stars themselves? Intelligence Officer Nala Voss received orders to lead a desperate reconnaissance mission into human space. Nala belonged to a species known for their stealth technology and espionage skills. If anyone could discover the truth about human capabilities, it was her. Nala's ship was small and equipped with the best cloaking devices the hegemony could build. She spent 3 weeks carefully moving through the outer edges of human territory, using passive sensors to gather information without being detected. What she discovered terrified her more than any battle report. The humans did not just have one monster warship. They had dozens of them, hidden throughout their space like sleeping giants. Some were larger than the Leviathan, others smaller but clearly designed for different types of warfare. All of them were invisible to normal sensors, and all of them bristled with weapons that defied known physics. But the worst discovery came when Nala intercepted human military communications. The Leviathan was not even their most powerful ship. There were vessels called planet crackers that could split worlds in half. There were stealth ships that could appear inside enemy formations without warning. There was something called a star forge that could apparently build new weapons using the raw material of suns. Nala realized that humanity had been preparing for galactic warfare since before they had even left their home system. Every aspect of their civilization was designed around the assumption that they would eventually face enemies with superior numbers and technology. They had built their entire military doctrine around the idea of being outgunned and outnumbered. When Nala returned to hegemony space with her intelligence report, the Council fell into stunned silence. They were not dealing with a primitive species that had gotten lucky. They were facing beings who understood war better than any species in the galaxy. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human government was making its own decisions about the future. President Carol Hayes met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff in a secure bunker deep beneath the surface. The room was filled with the most powerful military leaders humanity had ever produced. "The aliens have shown hostile intent toward our colonies," President Hayes said calmly. "They came to conquer us and enslave our people. I think it's time we showed them what human military doctrine really looks like." General Paul Rogers, head of the Space Force, nodded grimly. "Our intelligence suggests they're mobilizing their entire empire against us. We can't wait for them to come to us again. We need to take the fight to them." The decision was made quickly. Humanity would launch a preemptive strike against hegemony infrastructure. They would not target civilian populations, but they would destroy the aliens' capacity to wage war. Every military base, weapons factory, and shipyard in hegemony space would be marked for destruction. Captain Jake Morrison received his new orders while the Leviathan was hiding in the asteroid belt of an uninhabited system. He read the mission briefing twice to make sure he understood correctly. Earth Command was ordering him to take the war directly to enemy territory. "Lisa, plot a course for hegemony space," Jake ordered his tactical officer. "We're going hunting." "Lieutenant?" Commander Lisa Rodriguez studied the intelligence reports about hegemony military targets. There were over 300 installations spread across 50 star systems. Traditional warfare would require years to destroy them all. But the humans were not planning to fight a traditional war. "Captain, I've identified 17 critical targets," Lisa reported. "If we destroy these facilities, we can cripple their shipbuilding capacity and cut their supply lines. But they're all heavily defended." Jake smiled coldly. "Heavy defenses only work if you see your enemy coming." The Leviathan's first target was a massive shipyard in the Korath home system. The facility could build 100 warships at once and was protected by orbital defense platforms and a patrol fleet of 50 vessels. The human ship appeared without warning in the middle of the shipyard complex. The Leviathan's stealth technology was so advanced that it could maintain invisibility even while firing its weapons. The aliens never saw their attacker. Quantum torpedoes materialized inside the construction bays, destroying ships that were still being built. Plasma cannons turned defense platforms into clouds of superheated gas. In 15 minutes, the largest shipyard in hegemony space was reduced to floating debris. Before the alien defenders could even organize a response, the Leviathan vanished back into hyperspace. The pattern continued across hegemony territory. Human ships would appear without warning, destroy their targets with overwhelming firepower, and disappear before enemy reinforcements could arrive. They struck weapons factories, military academies, research stations, and command centers. The aliens had never faced an enemy that refused to fight fair. Their military doctrine was based on massive fleets meeting in open battle. They had no defense against small groups of invisible ships that struck like ghosts and vanished before retaliation was possible. On the bridge of the Leviathan, Jake watched as another hegemony military base burned in space. His crew worked with quiet efficiency, carrying out their mission with the precision of a surgical strike. "Target destroyed," Lisa reported. "All enemy vessels in the area have been eliminated." "Good," Jake replied. "Set course for the next target. We have a lot more work to do." Danny Walsh monitored the ship's systems from engineering. The constant jumping between star systems was putting stress on the hyperspace drive, but the ship was holding together. More importantly, the weapon systems were performing flawlessly. Every shot was finding its target, and every target was being completely destroyed. "Jake, we've been at this for 2 months," Danny said over the comm. "The crew is getting tired and the ship needs maintenance. Maybe we should head back to human space for resupply." "Not yet," Jake replied. "Intelligence says the hegemony is starting to crack. Some of their member species are talking about surrendering separately. We need to keep the pressure on until their whole empire falls apart." The psychological effect of the human campaign was exactly what Earth Command had hoped for. Hegemony member species that had never questioned their government's authority were now demanding protection that could not be provided. Military leaders who had never known defeat were resigning in shame. The entire structure of the Confederation was beginning to collapse. Fear of the humans was spreading faster than their actual attacks. Rumors spoke of human ships that could become invisible, weapons that could destroy entire fleets, and warriors who fought without mercy or honor. The truth was bad enough, but the legends were even worse. Commander Zerath, one of the few survivors of the first human attack, was called before the Hegemony Council to give another report. His hands shook as he spoke about what he had witnessed. "They are not like us," Zerath said quietly. "We fight for conquest and glory, They fight for survival, and they are very good at it. Every human ship is a weapon designed to kill everything around it. Every human warrior is trained to fight enemies who outnumber them 1,000 to 1. What do you recommend? Asked Counselor. Thane Zerath's answer sent shockwaves through the chamber. Surrender, immediately, before they decide to stop being merciful. The Hegemony Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted at each other in panic, while military advisors tried desperately to explain how their empire was falling apart. In just 4 months, the humans had destroyed over 60% of Hegemony military infrastructure without losing a single ship. Counselor Thane called for order, but his voice was lost in the noise. The Confederation that had ruled this part of the galaxy for a millennium was tearing itself apart from the inside. The Zalani Federation has withdrawn from the Hegemony, announced an aide who rushed into the chamber. They're offering separate peace terms to the humans. More shouts erupted from the assembled representatives. The Zalani were one of the founding members of the Hegemony. If they were abandoning the alliance, others would follow quickly. Admiral Krex, still bearing scars from his encounter with the human star-killer weapon, stood slowly from his chair. Half of his face was burned, and his left arm was mechanical, replaced after the stellar fire had nearly killed him. We have one option left, Krex said, in a voice that carried across the chamber. We activate the World Killers. Silence fell over the council. The World Killers were weapons so terrible that they had been banned from use for 3 centuries. They were massive devices that could destabilize a planet's core and cause it to explode. The Hegemony had built them during their early expansion, but had never used them after seeing the devastation they caused. You're talking about genocide, protested Counselor Vex from the peaceful Antaran species. We would be destroying entire worlds full of innocent civilians. The humans started. This war, Krex replied coldly. They chose to attack our infrastructure instead of fighting honorable battles. If they want to fight like barbarians, we will show them what real barbarity looks like. The vote was close, but fear won over morality. The Hegemony Council authorized the activation of 12 world killer devices. They would be used to destroy human colonies, starting with the most populous worlds. If humanity wanted to play with weapons of mass destruction, the Hegemony would show them who had more experience, but the humans were already 3 steps ahead. Amy Carter's code-breaking team had been monitoring Hegemony communications since the war began. They had broken the aliens' military encryption weeks ago and were reading their secret messages in real time. They're activating planet-killer weapons, Amy reported to Earth Command. Intelligence suggests they have 12 devices, and they're planning to use them against our colonies. The message reached Captain Jake Morrison within hours. The Leviathan was hiding in the shadow of a gas giant in Hegemony space, preparing for another strike against alien military targets. Jake read the intelligence report twice, then called his senior officers to an emergency meeting. The news changed everything. The aliens were escalating to weapons of mass destruction, which meant humanity had to respond with even greater force. They want to destroy our worlds, Jake said grimly. Earth Command is authorizing Operation Starfall. Lisa Rodriguez felt her blood turn cold. She had helped plan Operation Starfall years ago, but she had never expected it to be used. It was humanity's ultimate military response, designed to end wars by making them too terrible to continue. Captain, are you sure about this? Lisa asked. Starfall will change everything. There won't be any going back. The aliens made their choice, Jake replied. Now we make ours. Operation Starfall was simple in concept, but devastating in execution. Instead of targeting military installations, humanity would strike at the heart of hegemony power. They would attack the capital worlds of member species, the core systems that held the Confederation together. But they would not destroy the planets. Instead, they would demonstrate that they could destroy them anytime they wanted. The message would be clear. Surrender now. or watch your homeworlds burn. The Leviathan was joined by 7 other human warships for the operation. Together, they represented the most powerful fleet humanity had ever assembled. Each ship was equipped with weapons that could crack continents and shields that could withstand the fury of stars. Their first target was the Korath homeworld, a planet of 12 billion aliens, and the military heart of the hegemony, the world, was protected by orbital defense stations, patrol fleets, and planetary shields that had never been breached. The human fleet appeared without warning in orbit around the planet. 8 ships materialized out of empty space, their weapons already charged and ready. The sight of them sent panic through the orbital defenses. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human fleet," Jake broadcast on all frequencies. "You have 1 hour to evacuate your orbital installations and withdraw your fleets. After that, we will demonstrate what human weapons can do to a planet." The aliens tried to respond with force. Defense stations opened fire while patrol ships moved to intercept the human vessels. It was a futile gesture. Human weapons destroyed everything that approached them, while alien energy beams splashed harmlessly against advanced shields. When the hour was up, Jake gave the order. "Danny, fire the Continental Cracker." The weapon was designed for mining operations, meant to split asteroids and expose valuable metals. But when fired at a planet, it could crack tectonic plates and trigger massive earthquakes. A beam of focused energy struck the planet's surface. The ground split apart in a line 3,000 kilometers long and 50 kilometers deep. Lava erupted from the wound in the planet's crust, while earthquakes shook entire continents. "This is what we can do with our mining equipment," Jake broadcast to the terrified aliens. "Would you like to see our actual weapons?" The demonstration continued for 6 hours. Human ships used weapons designed for construction and mining to tear apart continents and boil oceans. They showed the aliens exactly how much damage they could inflict without even using their military arsenal. By the end of the day, the Korath homeworld was a broken shell of its former self. Half the continents were underwater, and the other half were on fire. The planet would take centuries to recover, but it was still inhabitable. The humans had made their point without committing genocide. The same demonstration was repeated on 5 other hegemony core worlds. In each case, human fleets appeared without warning, gave the aliens time to evacuate, and then proceeded to break their planets like toys. The psychological effect was devastating. Species that had ruled star systems for millennia watched their homeworlds being destroyed by aliens who treated planets like construction projects. The humans were not just militarily superior. They operated on a scale of power that made the hegemony look like children playing with sticks. On the 6th day of Operation Starfall, the Hegemony Council sent a message on all frequencies throughout the galaxy. "We surrender unconditionally to the human military forces. We request immediate ceasefire and offer to negotiate terms for peace." Captain Jake Morrison received the message while the Leviathan was preparing to crack another planet. He read it carefully, then forwarded it to Earth Command for verification. "Lisa, stand down all weapons," Jake ordered. "It looks like the war is over." But even as the shooting stopped, Jake knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. Every species within 100 light-years now knew that humans possessed weapons that could reshape worlds and fleets that could appear anywhere without warning. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and it would be an expansion that no one would dare to oppose. "Signal the fleet," Jake commanded. "We're going home, but keep all weapons charged. I have a feeling we'll be back." The meeting was arranged in neutral space, halfway between human territory and the hegemony capital. A small space station had been hastily constructed for the peace negotiations, equipped with life support systems for both human and alien biology. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the docking bay of the Leviathan and watched as the hegemony delegation's ship approached. It was a sleek vessel designed for diplomacy rather than war, but Jake could see the fear in how carefully it approached the human fleet. The human delegation was small. Jake himself, Lisa Rodriguez as military advisor, and Ambassador Helen Parker, a career diplomat who had been pulled out of retirement for this historic moment. Behind them waited the most powerful warship humanity had ever built, a reminder of what would happen if negotiations failed. The hegemony delegation was led by diplomat Thane Korak, a tall alien with gray skin and 4 arms who had been chosen, specifically because his species had suffered the least damage during the human campaign. With him came military advisors, legal experts, and trembling representatives from species whose homeworlds had been cracked open like eggs. Ambassador Parker had spent weeks studying alien psychology and cultural norms. She understood that these beings had never negotiated from a position of weakness before. Their entire civilization was built around the idea of superior force determining the outcome of conflicts. "Welcome aboard the station," Ambassador Parker said calmly as the alien delegation entered the main conference room. "I hope we can reach an agreement that benefits both our peoples." Diplomat Korak looked around the room nervously. Through the viewports, he could see the 8 human warships floating in perfect formation. Each vessel bristled with weapons that had proved capable of destroying entire fleets. "Your terms," Korak said without preamble. "What do you want from us?" "Ambassador." Parker smiled slightly, direct and to the point. She appreciated that in a negotiation. "Our terms are simple," she began. "First, complete withdrawal of all hegemony forces from human space and a 50-light-year buffer zone around our territory. Second, formal recognition of humanity as an independent and sovereign power. Third, reparations for the unprovoked attack on our colonies." The alien delegates looked at each other with growing panic. The buffer zone alone would cost them dozens of star systems. The reparations could bankrupt their treasury. "Your demands are excessive," protested Korak. "We cannot simply abandon entire sectors of our territory." "You should have thought of that before you tried to conquer us," Lisa Rodriguez said coldly, from her position behind Ambassador Parker. "Your fleets came to our space with the intention of enslaving our people. You're lucky we're willing to negotiate at all." Commander Zarath, who had been included in the delegation as a military advisor, spoke up quietly. "They are being merciful. I have seen what their weapons can do. They could have destroyed every world in hegemony space if they wanted to." The fee. Negotiations continued for 3 days. The aliens tried to bargain down the human demands, but they had no leverage. Every time they protested the terms, Captain Morrison would quietly mention another human capability that the hegemony had not yet seen. "Perhaps you would like a demonstration of our deep strike capability," Jake suggested when the aliens complained about the size of the buffer zone. "We have ships that can appear in your capital system without warning. Would you like to see them?" The threats were delivered calmly, almost casually, but their effect was devastating. The alien delegates had no doubt that humanity possessed exactly the capabilities they claimed. On the second day, the negotiations were interrupted by urgent news from hegemony space. 3 more member species had declared independence from the Confederation and were seeking separate peace agreements with humanity. The Zalani Federation had already signed a non-aggression pact and was offering to become a human protectorate. "Your empire is falling apart," Ambassador Parker observed. "Perhaps it would be wise to accept our terms while you still have the authority to speak for your remaining members." Diplomat Korak realized that he was not just negotiating the end of a war. He was trying to save what remained of a 1,000-year-old empire that was crumbling under the weight of humanity's military superiority. By the 3rd day, the basic framework of an agreement had been reached. The hegemony would withdraw from human space and recognize humanity's right to expansion. They would pay reparations in the form of advanced technology and raw materials. Most importantly, they would acknowledge humanity as the dominant military power in this region of the galaxy, But Ambassador Parker had one more demand that shocked the alien delegates. "We want complete access to your historical records and cultural databases," she announced. "We need to understand every species in this part of the galaxy, their capabilities, their territories, and their potential threats to human security." "You're asking for our most sensitive intelligence," protested Korak. "Information about species that have nothing to do with this conflict." "We're asking for information that will help us avoid future conflicts," Parker replied. "Humanity prefers peace, but we will always be prepared for war. The more we know about our neighbors, the better we can protect ourselves." The request revealed something that terrified the alien delegates even more than human weapons. Humanity was not content to simply win this war and return to isolation. They were planning for expansion on a galactic scale. Captain Morrison spoke, for the first time in hours. "Let me make something clear. Humanity has been alone in the galaxy for our entire history. We've had to assume that every alien species we met would be hostile. Your attack on our colonies proved that assumption correct." He stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "From now on, we will expand into this galaxy with the assumption that we are surrounded by potential enemies. We will build ships, establish bases, and claim territory based on that assumption. The only question is whether other species will be our allies or our obstacles." The message was clear. Humanity was not going back to their small corner of space. They were going to expand throughout the galaxy, and they would do it with or without the cooperation of existing powers. Diplomat Korak felt a chill run down his spine. The hegemony had awakened something that they could not control or defeat. Humanity was not just another species seeking territory. They were a force of nature that would reshape the entire galactic order. "We accept your terms," Korak said, quietly. "All of them." The formal treaty was signed the next day, in a ceremony broadcast throughout both human and hegemony space. The document established humanity as a major galactic power and created a new balance of power that would last for centuries. As the alien delegation prepared to leave, Commander Zerath approached Captain Morrison privately. "I have a question," Zerath said. "Your species has weapons that can destroy fleets and crack planets. You command technology that we cannot comprehend. Why do you want peace? Why not simply conquer everything?" Jake considered the question carefully before answering. "Because conquest creates enemies. Peace creates opportunities. We would rather trade with other species than fight them. But if anyone threatens human space again, they will discover that our capacity for war is unlimited." As the hegemony ships departed, Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Leviathan and watched them disappear into hyperspace. The war was over, but humanity's expansion was just beginning. "Lisa, set course for Earth," Jake ordered. "It's time to go home and plan for the future." The human fleet turned and vanished into the darkness between stars, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same. 6 months after the treaty was signed, the galaxy had become a very different place. Species that had been part of the hegemony for centuries were now independent, seeking their own alliances and trade agreements. Many of them sent diplomatic missions to human space, hoping to establish friendly relations with the new dominant power. Captain Jake Morrison found himself in an unexpected role. Instead of commanding the Leviathan in battle, he was now meeting with alien ambassadors and trade representatives. The ship had become a mobile embassy, traveling between star systems to establish humanity's new position in the galactic community. The first species to request a formal alliance was the Antaron Federation, a group of peaceful worlds that had been forced to join the hegemony 300 years earlier. Their leader, Ambassador Vera Singh, came aboard the Leviathan with an offer that surprised everyone. "We want to become a human protectorate," Ambassador Singh announced during the meeting in the ship's conference room. "We will provide resources and technology in exchange for protection from other hostile species. Jake exchanged glances with Lisa Rodriguez, who was now serving as his diplomatic advisor as well as tactical officer. They had not expected aliens to voluntarily submit to human authority. "What exactly do you mean by protectorate?" Jake asked carefully. "We would maintain our internal government and culture," Singh explained, "but we would accept human oversight of our military and foreign policy. In exchange, you would guarantee our security and include us in your expansion into unclaimed space." It was an attractive offer. The Antarans were known for their advanced biotechnology and peaceful nature. They would make ideal allies for humanity's expansion plans. "We will consider your proposal," Jake replied diplomatically. "But understand that humanity takes its responsibilities seriously. If we accept you as a protectorate, we will defend you against any threat." The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth Command. Admiral Patricia Hayes, the President's military advisor, appeared on the main screen with news that changed everything. "Captain Morrison, we have a situation. Long range. Sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching human space from the galactic core. The ships are unlike anything in our databases, and they're moving at speeds that should be impossible." Jake felt his blood turn cold. Just when humanity was establishing its place in the galaxy, a new threat was approaching. How long until they reach human space? "At their current speed, approximately 6 weeks, Admiral Hayes replied. "We're mobilizing the entire fleet, but we may need the Leviathan back home." The transmission ended, leaving Jake to consider the implications. If another hostile species was approaching, humanity would need every ally it could get. "Ambassador Singh," Jake said, turning back to the Antaran representative, "I think we can expedite your protectorate request, but first, we need to know everything you can tell us about species from the galactic core." The Antaran's face went pale. "You're talking about the Devourers, aren't you? The ancient ones who consume entire star systems?" "Tell us everything," Lisa demanded. What Ambassador Singh told them was terrifying. The Devourers were an ancient machine intelligence that had been dormant for over 10,000 years. They consumed organic matter and energy to fuel their expansion, leaving behind nothing but dead space. According to legend, they had once controlled a third of the galaxy before mysteriously going silent. "The hegemony has records of their last appearance," Singh continued. "They destroyed over 1,000 star systems before they retreated back to the galactic core. Nobody knows why they stopped, but if they're returning now..." Jake made his decision immediately. "Signal Earth Command. Tell them we're coming home and we're bringing allies. Humanity is going to need every friend we can get." The Leviathans' return to human space was met with a flurry of activity. The entire human fleet was being mobilized for the greatest threat their species had ever faced. But humanity was no longer alone. The Antaran Federation had joined them, along with 3 other former hegemony species who preferred human protection to facing the Devourers alone. Admiral Patricia Hayes met Jake at Earth's orbital command station. The facility was buzzing with activity as ships from across human space converged for the defense of their territory. "What's our tactical situation?" Jake asked as he reviewed the latest intelligence reports. "Bad," Admiral Hayes replied bluntly. "The Devourer fleet consists of over 10,000 vessels, each one larger than our biggest ships. Their technology is at least 1,000 years ahead of ours, possibly more." "What about our allies?" "The Antarans are contributing their bioships, which might be resistant to Devourer technology. The other species are providing what they can, but honestly, we're still vastly outnumbered." Jake studied the tactical displays showing the approaching Devourer fleet. The enemy ships were massive, some of them the size of small moons. They moved through space with the efficiency of a machine intelligence that had been perfecting warfare for millennia. "Do we have any advantages at all?" Jake asked. "One," Admiral Hayes smiled grimly. "They've been asleep for 10,000 years. They don't know about human military doctrine or our weapons technology. They're expecting to face the same primitive organics they conquered before. Then we'll have to make sure their first lesson is their last, Jake replied. The defense of human space was planned as a series of layered ambushes designed to maximize damage while preserving human forces. The Devourers would find no easy targets and no quick victories. The first engagement took place at the edge of human space, where a small Devourer scouting force encountered a human patrol fleet. The aliens expected primitive vessels that would be easily destroyed. Instead, they found ships that could become invisible, weapons that ignored conventional defenses, and tactics that made no sense to a machine intelligence that had conquered. Through brute force for millennia, the Devourer scout ships were destroyed before they could report back to their main fleet. But more importantly, human engineers were able to analyze the wreckage and learn about enemy technology. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh led the analysis team that studied the captured Devourer systems. What he found was both encouraging and terrifying. Their technology is incredibly advanced, Danny reported to the human command staff. But it's also incredibly old. They've been using the same designs for thousands of years without innovation. They rely on overwhelming power rather than tactical flexibility. Can we exploit that? Jake asked. Maybe, Danny replied. Their ships are designed to fight large, fleet actions against conventional opponents. They're not prepared for hit-and-run attacks or stealth warfare. If we can avoid direct confrontation and focus on surgical strikes, then we fight the war on our terms, Jake concluded. The main Devourer fleet arrived at human space 3 weeks later, expecting to find terrified organics ready for conquest. Instead, they found empty space and automated defense platforms that opened fire the moment they appeared. The platforms were destroyed quickly, but they had served their purpose. They forced the Devourers to reveal their weapons and tactics while human ships observed from stealth positions. All ships, initiate Plan Prometheus, Jake ordered from the bridge of the Leviathan. Throughout human space, invisible warships began appearing behind Devourer formations. They struck at supply ships, command vessels, and isolated squadrons before vanishing back into the darkness. The machine intelligence commanding the Devourer fleet had never faced an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Its programming was designed for conquest through superior firepower, not for hunting ghosts in the dark. But the Devourers were learning, and they were adapting their tactics with machine efficiency. The war for the galaxy was just beginning, and humanity would need every advantage they could get. Signal all human forces, Jake commanded. This is what we trained for. Show them why organic intelligence will always defeat artificial programming. The battle for humanity's survival had begun. The war against the Devourers lasted 18 months and reshaped the entire galaxy. It was a conflict unlike anything that had ever been seen, pitting organic creativity against machine efficiency on a scale that spanned hundreds of star systems. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Leviathan as the final Devourer fleet retreated toward the galactic core. Around him, the combined forces of humanity and their allies celebrated the end of the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. The victory had come at a terrible cost. 12 human worlds had been consumed by Devourer harvester ships before they could be evacuated. 3 of humanity's greatest warships had been destroyed in the final battle for the enemy's command vessel. But the machine intelligence that had once terrorized the galaxy was finally broken. All enemy vessels have withdrawn beyond our sensor range, reported Lisa Rodriguez from her tactical station. Long-range scouts confirm they're heading back to the galactic core. Any sign they'll return? Jake asked. Negative, Lisa replied. Intelligence analysis suggests their main processing cores were damaged in the final engagement. It will take them centuries to rebuild, if they ever do. The destruction of the Devourer fleet had been accomplished through a combination of human tactics and alien technology. The Antaron bioships had proved resistant to Devourer energy weapons, while human stealth technology allowed strike forces to attack enemy weak points. But the real key to victory had been humanity's refusal to fight the war the Devourers expected. Instead of meeting the machine fleet in massive space battles, the humans had fought a guerrilla campaign across multiple star systems. They had struck at devourer supply lines, communication nodes, and isolated squadrons while avoiding direct confrontation with the main fleet. The final victory had come when human engineers, led by Danny Walsh, discovered how to disrupt the quantum communication network that linked all devourer ships. Without their hive mind coordination, the machine fleet had become vulnerable to conventional attacks. "Danny, how are the repairs coming?" Jake asked over the ship's comm system. "We'll be operational in another 6 hours," came the reply from engineering. "But Jake, we need to talk about what comes next. The weapons we used against the devourers changed everything." Jake understood what Danny meant. The technologies developed during the war had given humanity capabilities that bordered on the godlike. They could now create weapons that disrupted space-time itself, shields that existed in multiple dimensions, and ships that could travel between galaxies. A message from Earth Command interrupted his thoughts. President Carol Hayes appeared on the main screen, her face showing the exhaustion of a leader who had guided her people through their greatest crisis. "Captain Morrison, congratulations on your victory," the president said. "But we have decisions to make about humanity's future in the galaxy. The choices facing humanity were unprecedented. They now possess technology that made them the most powerful species in the galaxy by a vast margin. They could claim any territory they wanted, impose their will on any civilization, or even expand beyond their home galaxy. What are the recommendations from the Joint Chiefs?" Jake asked. "They're divided," President Hayes replied. "Some want to establish a human empire spanning half the galaxy. Others think we should focus on peaceful expansion and trade. But everyone agrees that we can't go back to the way things were before." Over the following weeks, humanity made its decision. They would not become conquerors like the old hegemony, but they would not return to isolation either. Instead, they would establish a new kind of galactic order based on protection and cooperation. The Human Commonwealth was founded 6 months after the end of the Devourer War. It was an alliance of species that accepted human military protection in exchange for mutual cooperation and shared technology. Membership was voluntary, but the benefits were obvious to anyone who had witnessed human capabilities. The Antaran Federation became the first full member, followed quickly by 8 other species that had fought alongside humanity against the Devourers. Each member maintained their own government and culture while contributing to the Commonwealth's defense and expansion. Captain Morrison found himself appointed as the first admiral of the Commonwealth Defense Force. The Leviathan became the flagship of a fleet that patrolled the galaxy, ensuring that no species would ever again face extinction alone. "It's ironic," Lisa Rodriguez commented during one of their patrols through former hegemony space. "We started this war trying to protect our small corner of the galaxy. Now we're responsible for protecting everyone. The price of survival," Jake replied. "If we want to live in peace, we have to be strong enough to guarantee that peace for others." The new galactic order that emerged was unlike anything that had existed before. Instead of conquest and subjugation, it was based on mutual defense and shared prosperity. Species that joined the Commonwealth gained access to human technology and protection, while humanity gained allies and resources for continued expansion. But the most important change was psychological. The galaxy's species now knew that organic intelligence could triumph over any threat, no matter how powerful. The age of machine dominance was over, replaced by an era of biological creativity and cooperation. 5 years after the war's end, Ambassador Helen Parker stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Kepler Station. Representatives from over 200 species had gathered to formally recognize the new order that humanity had created. The Human Commonwealth stands for the principle that no species should face extinction alone, Parker announced to the assembled delegates. "We offer protection to any civilization that seeks peace and cooperation. but we also promise swift justice for any who threaten innocent life." The vote was unanimous. The Commonwealth was recognized as the galaxy's primary peacekeeping force, with the authority to intervene against any threat to galactic stability. In the years that followed, humanity continued to expand across the galaxy, always accompanied by their alien allies. They established colonies on distant worlds, built massive space habitats, and even began exploring other galaxies. But they never forgot the lessons of their first contact with alien life. Every human ship carried weapons, capable of destroying fleets. Every human colony was protected by defensive systems that could withstand planetary bombardment. Every human child learned that peace was only possible when backed by superior force. Captain Jake Morrison, now Admiral of the Commonwealth Fleet, stood on the bridge of the Leviathan as it patrolled the edge of the galaxy. Through the viewports, he could see stars that humanity had never visited, worlds that might contain new allies or new threats. "Any regrets about how this all turned out?" Lisa asked, joining him at the observation deck. Jake considered the question carefully. Humanity had become the galaxy's dominant power through violence and superior weapons. They had imposed their will on an entire galaxy and claimed the right to determine the fate of countless species. "No," he said finally. "We didn't start this fight, but we finished it. And now billions of beings can live in peace because humanity was strong enough to protect them." As the Leviathan continued its patrol through the darkness between stars, Jake reflected on how far humanity had come. They had entered the galaxy as a small, isolated species with no knowledge of alien life. They were now the guardians of galactic civilization, protectors of the weak and defenders of the innocent. It was not the future anyone had imagined when humans first reached for the stars, but it was the future they had earned through courage, sacrifice, and an unwillingness to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. The age of humanity had begun, and it would last for millennia to come.